Ah, yes. The two-parter. What's funny is that, despite a classic Who two-parter being about the same runtime as what we're used to with regular new Who episodes, Classic Who didn't really go to this well very often, and when it did, it was usually more for behind-the-scenes reasons than any creative impulse. In the case of Edge of Destruction, while Season 1 of Doctor Who ended up running for 42 episodes, when it first started out, there was always the possibility that it wouldn't make it past 13. So, after An Unearthly Child gobbled at 4 episodes, and The Daleks scarfed down 7, script editor David Whittaker knocked this two-parter out so that if the show got cancelled, it wouldn't end midway through a serial. It's fitting then that The Edge of Destruction should take the form of a bottle episode, perhaps the quintessential type of story made more for production's sake than creativity. However, it's also rather fitting that of all the stories to convince people that the show was worth renewing, it was a bottle episode. I mean, think about it. Bottle episodes live or die on the strength of the characters in them. If you can make an entertaining bottle episode, that means the characters of your show are developed and interesting enough that they can still engage with the audience entirely on the strength of their interactions. And if the characters are strong enough to do that, then you can put them in just about any situation, with a good idea of what they'll do and how to make them entertaining. If the Doctor, Susan, Ian, and Barbara could all come out of this episode looking well, the future of the show was secured. So, how did they fare? I mean, obviously the answer is quite well. The show went on for several years, but, I mean, look, it's not easy coming up with compelling cliffhangers for these, okay? Okay. Right, so, before we discuss any other aspect of the serial, let's nip one particular scene in the bud before I get any smart aleck smirking in the comment section. Yes. In Edge of Destruction, because this was written before the Doctor's bizarre alien biology was invented, Ian checks the Doctor's health at one point to say that his heart is beating normally. Heart singular. This has caused quite a tizzy to those who like to overthink their favorite science fiction program instead of simply accepting the fact that the writers made everything up as they went along, and we the viewers should really just relax. But rejoice, for there is a perfectly cromulent Watsonian explanation as to why Ian would think that the Doctor had only one heartbeat in that scene, which all you pedants can latch onto when discussing continuity in canon. See, the plot of Edge of Destruction involves something going wrong with the TARDIS and the crew getting zapped with energy from the console and subsequently hallucinating and descending into paranoia. And when Ian checks up on the doc, he's currently in the midst of his own hallucination. So there you go. As part of his delusion, Ian thought he heard a single heartbeat instead of two. There, I've solved it. And on the subject of those hallucinations and paranoia, what's neat about Edge is that you couldn't really do it with any other companion configuration but this one. In order for this bottle episode to work, you need 3 things to happen. Firstly, there needs to be enough members of Team TARDIS to have them break off into factions. Secondly, there needs to be enough distrust and animosity between the team members to make factions possible. And thirdly, well, we'll get to thirdly in a bit, but for now, I want to focus on points 1 and 2. Like I established in the last 2 episodes, at this point, despite being officially companions of the Doctor, Ian and Barbara do not actually want to travel with him. The TARDIS crew don't like each other, they don't trust each other, and they are ripe for this distrust to be exploited as the forces within the TARDIS affect them. The enemy that must be overcome in the story then is not some alien menace or meddling time traveler, but themselves. Ian and Barbara naturally stick together, and while Susan tries to be a peacemaker, her loyalty ultimately lies with her grandfather. And remember, this is the Doctor at his most selfish and sinister. So once a bit of paranoia gets into him, the Doctor becomes a full-blown villain, refusing to listen to any suggestion of being wrong once he gets it into his head that Ian and Barbara sabotaged his ship and that they've got to go, one way or another. Ah yes, the Doctor's ship. He keeps using those words, my ship. And at this point in the series, we have no real reason to think of it as anything other than a normal spaceship. I mean, sure, it can travel in time, and it's bigger on the inside, but apart from that, it seems to work in about the same way as most futuristic 60s spaceships. At least, it seemed that way in the past 2 serials. It's only in this serial that David Whittaker decides to establish an aspect of the TARDIS that will have massive ramifications in future stories. Namely, that the TARDIS is far from just a spaceship or time machine, but is rather a living, breathing, conscious entity, with its own intelligence and an infinite depth in its walls. This is the third most important factor to making this bottle episode work, making said bottle not simply mysterious, not simply dangerous, but actively intelligent. Doctor Who could have very easily made the TARDIS just another time machine or spaceship, but going the route Whittaker went in the serial opened up a whole new avenue of story ideas, and helped fuel the tension of this bottle episode. What's especially interesting about this, though, is that in Edge, the Doctor himself also scoffs at the notion that the TARDIS is anything other than a regular spaceship. And from the way he possessively describes it as my ship, it comes across as though the TARDIS is simply a unique machine that the Doctor built as an eccentric inventor on his own home planet. But if the Doctor is wrong about that, what else is he wrong about? Or perhaps even hiding from us? He's certainly wrong about his suspicions towards Ian and Barbara. And that is ultimately the struggle he faces in this story. The Doctor needing to admit that he's wrong. He doesn't really do it by the end. He sort of half-heartedly apologizes without apologizing to Barbara once they fix the TARDIS, but it's clear that things will be different between the TARDIS crew from now on. They've gotten all their anger and frustration and distrust out in the open, and now they can begin the process of overcoming it. This time around, our novelization is written by Nigel Robinson, who was the official editor for Target Novelizations in the 80s and who seems to have a pretty good reputation as a Doctor Who writer, despite never contributing to the show itself. After reading this, while some of his quirks as writer raised an eyebrow for me, for some reason he thinks Susan is Asian, I guess because of the eyeliner, I can see where this reputation came from. Unlike Terrance Dicks or David Whittaker, Robinson's prose feels much more suited to the novel format, and he reads quite smoothly. More than that, though, the moment that really sold me on this adaptation of Edge's Destruction was Robinson's version of the scene with the clock. See, to show that there's something going wrong with time in the TARDIS, there's a scene where the TARDIS crew looks at a clock and sees that its face is melted. It's a really creepy and effective scene in the novel. But in the serial, I didn't actually know what was going on, because with everything being in black and white and 360p, I was sadly unable to notice just what exactly was so wrong with the clock to make everyone freak out like they did. Yeah, that's kind of a problem with a lot of classic Who. It's something of a joke amongst the fandom that the special effects are pretty rubbish and cheap, and while I'm not someone who sneers at such budgetary constraints, the lack of such constraints in the novel format are a key advantage to Robinson, who wastes no time not simply replicating scenes from the serial, but putting you inside the heads of the TARDIS crew as they descend into hallucinations and paranoia. William Russell is a phenomenal actor, and he's able to effectively convey the fact that he's hallucinating just from his performance. But when we get to see the hallucinations through his own eyes, via Robinson's vivid descriptions, it's a whole other experience. Another thing Robinson gets to do, since this was a two-part serial and thus didn't have too much plot to fill out page count, is add extra scenes. More strange things happening in the TARDIS, more arguments between the crew as tensions run higher and higher, and more hints towards the Doctor and Susan's status as aliens thanks to the benefits of retroactive continuity. The biggest change of all, though, comes towards the end. While Barbara is the one to first catch on to what exactly is wrong with the TARDIS, in the original serial it is ultimately the Doctor and Ian who save the day. The novel keeps the focus on Barbara, so that not only does she contribute more to the climax than simply sitting back while the Doctor and Ian take care of things, but now that she was the one who saved the day, the Doctor must humble himself and apologize for his behavior. And apologize he does. An actual, proper apology this time, and a much more skillful demonstration of where the Doctor's character sits after this adventure. Maybe the TARDIS crew will continue to bicker and squabble in the future, but they've learned to trust and rely on one another now, and things will be different between them as they step into the next chapter of their travels together. I confess, when I first thought up the idea of comparing Doctor Who serials to their novel adaptations, I wasn't sure if the idea would work. Sure, it seemed like an interesting and unique angle to review the series, but when the serial and novel of An Unearthly Child proved pretty much indistinguishable, and the serial and novel of the Daleks proved too different to properly compare to one another, I started to wonder if Lost in Regeneration was doomed to stop before it even started. It wasn't until this novelization, when I read an adaptation that not only changed certain aspects of the original story, but improved on them to provide a far more enriching experience, that Lost in Regeneration finally coalesced. That's rather fitting, I suppose, since this is also the moment when the show coalesced. The ratings and reviews of Edge of Destruction when it aired were quite good, and the show managed to put out another 29 episodes this season and 25 more seasons after that. And here we are, 60 plus years after Doctor Who first aired, still talking about it. Between the serial and the novel, my recommendation this time is firmly on the side of the novel. It is easily the best way to experience the story, and the way I would insist you take it in when you first dip your toes into Season 1. So, in the meantime, I'm Marco Keen, and if you like this video and would like to help this channel out, please consider liking, commenting, or subscribing. Don't forget to ring that bell if you want to catch new episodes each Saturday tea time, and don't forget to share this video to help boost it in the algorithm. Thank you all for watching, and a special thank you to the BBC and Dominic Noble for not suing the pants off of me. Bye bye.